I saw her falling, and for a second, I thought I'd let her. Have you ever wondered what makes a man truly change? I'm not talking about switching clothes, moving houses, or starting a new job. I mean changing deep inside. Waking up one day and realizing that the very thing you once took pride in now makes you feel ashamed. That what you used to call instinct might have just been blindness. That's exactly what happened to me that day, standing on the edge of that cliff, staring into the eyes of a lioness. My name is Ethan Walker, and if you had met me a few years ago, you'd probably have turned away. I was a hunter, a professional, cold, precise, and well-known. The kind of man who saw the wild as a game board, and myself as the one making all the moves. I never cried over an animal, never hesitated, until that day. I woke up early like always. The sun was barely stretching behind the southern hills of Kenya, and the air carried that dry scent of dust and wind-whipped grass. I knew those trails like I knew the lines on my own hands, every rock, every twisted tree. But that morning, something felt off. It wasn't just silence, it was the absence of it, like the world itself had stopped breathing. You ever feel that? Then I heard it, a roar, sharp roar, not the kind you hear when something's hunting. It was pain. Then almost immediately after, a sound that cut deeper than any bullet I'd ever fired. Cubs, crying, high-pitched, panicked, like they were calling out to someone who didn't speak their language. I followed the noise, climbed the rocks, slipping through thorny brush and dry ledges, and when I reached the top, my heart stopped. Right there, just meters from me, was her, the lioness, hanging by her front claws over the cliff edge, her muscles trembling, chest heaving. Every second was a battle against gravity, but it was her eyes that hit me like a bullet, not wild, not angry, just pleading, silently, like she knew. On the ledge above her were two cubs, thin, frightened, creeping toward the edge like they wanted to understand what was happening. One of them let out this tiny mewl, like it was calling for its mom, and she was hanging on with everything she had. Right there, I had two choices, and neither was easy. I could have turned my back. I'd done it before. Animals fall, animals die. That's nature, right? And as a hunter, you're taught to never interfere. Rule number 1, don't save, don't feel, don't flinch. But that rule, it shattered, right there on that cliff, because something in me, maybe the part I buried years ago, started screaming. And that's when the real dilemma began. The edge was narrow, one wrong step, and I'd fall too. The rocks were loose, crumbling. And if I reached for her, what if she attacked? She was still a lioness, wild, instinctive, and I reeked of blood, not just on my clothes, but in my soul. But when I stepped forward, she didn't growl. She didn't move, just looked at me, like she was saying, now, and I understood. I dropped to my knees slowly, feeling the sun heating my back, and reached out. Her claws were embedded in the rock, but one paw was slipping. I grabbed it, tight. She was heavier than I expected. Every inch I pulled felt like a lifetime. I was sweating, shaking, not sure if I was helping to or just delaying the inevitable. And then the rock gave way. It all moved in slow motion. A chunk of the ledge cracked and tumbled. She lost her grip. For a split second, her body swung out into the air, paws flailing, eyes wide with terror. I screamed. I swear to God, I screamed louder than I ever had, and I pulled with everything I had left. And that's when she did something impossible. She surrendered. Instead of thrashing, instead of fighting, she went still. She trusted me. In that 1 second, between sky and ground, this wild lioness chose to trust a man like me. And that shattered me inside. With one final pull, I brought her back to the ledge. Her paws hit solid ground. She dragged herself forward, gasping, shaking, eyes locked on mine. And we stayed like that, frozen, no sound, no movement, just understanding. The cubs rushed to her. nuzzled against her like they had found the world again. And me, I knelt there and cried, because in that moment I wasn't a hunter anymore. I was just a man, trying to fix something broken inside him. Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from. And if this story already touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share. Because when we spread stories like this, we spread empathy, hope, and humanity. But what happened next? No one was ready to see. I didn't move for a long time. After the lioness and her cubs lay down a few feet away from me, breathing heavy but alive, I just sat there, on that cliff, the wind brushing my face, my hands still shaking, and a strange weight in my chest, not fear, not regret, something deeper. Like the ghosts of every animal I'd ever hunted were sitting there too, watching. The lioness didn't run. She didn't retreat into the brush like most wild animals would. She lay down slowly, her body still tense from the fight, but her eyes on me. And I kept wondering why she hadn't attacked me, why she hadn't clawed my face when I grabbed her, why, in that moment of death, she chose trust. The cubs curled into her side, one of them licking her muzzle, the other nestling under her paw. They didn't look scared anymore, just tired, safe. And for a second I felt like I didn't belong there, like I was trespassing in something sacred. I had seen animals die, I had made animals die, but I had never seen one thank me. And yes, that's what it felt like. It was in the way she breathed, in the way she blinked, that long, slow blink like a silent nod. I stood up carefully, dusted my jeans, took a step back. She lifted her head, but didn't flinch. I swear, that lioness was letting me go. No hate, no fear, just release. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I walked for hours, through the tall grass, the dry hills, the old elephant trails, and my mind kept replaying every hunt, every shot, every blood trail I had followed. I remembered the pride I used to feel when I'd posed next to a lion I had taken down. God, what kind of man was that? What kind of man was I? By the time the sun was melting into the horizon, painting the whole savannah in gold and red, I found myself back at my cabin. But I couldn't go inside. I sat on the porch, staring at the rifle leaning against the wall, the same one I'd used for 15 years, and suddenly it looked wrong, like a tool from a life I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw hers. That moment she looked at me, not with fear, not with rage, but with something that broke me open, vulnerability, and something like hope. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. My legs moved before my thoughts. I grabbed a bottle of water, some dried meat, and headed back to the cliff. I don't even know why. Part of me thought they'd be gone. Another part of me hoped they weren't. But they were there, curled up under the same tree, the cubs playing gently with each other, and the lioness resting her head on her paws, eyes half closed. When she saw me, she didn't get up, just lifted her head, ears twitching. I stopped about 10 meters away, lowered myself to the ground and waited. Minutes passed, then more. A bird sang somewhere, the wind picked up, and the cubs kept glancing at me, curious but not afraid. That's when I realized something strange. She hadn't moved much, not even to hunt. Her breathing was slower now, labored. There was a wound on her shoulder I hadn't seen the day before, probably from scraping against the rocks during the fall, and it didn't look good. I didn't have to be a vet to know what infection looked like, and now the real dilemma. Do I step in again? Do I break every instinct and rule that had been beaten into me since I was a boy? Help a predator? Interfere with nature? Or do I leave and let nature take its course? But this wasn't just nature anymore. This was personal. I reached into my bag, took out a bottle of water and gently slid it on the ground toward them. She watched, eyes sharp, cub ears perked. Then nothing. Just watching. I stayed there for 2 hours, talking, not loud, just enough, like I was speaking to a friend. I told her about my dad, about how he taught me to shoot before he taught me to read, about the first lion I ever hunted, about how I stopped feeling anything after a while, how yesterday something in me cracked. She didn't understand my words, obviously, but she listened. That's the only way I can describe it. She listened. When I stood up to leave, she let out a sound. Not a growl, not a roar, a low, guttural exhale, soft, deep like a sigh, and it froze me, because in that sound I heard a message. Something was wrong. She was weak, too weak, and suddenly I realized if I didn't do something, if I didn't really step in, those cubs would lose her, and she had trusted me. Twice. That kind of trust comes with a cost and a choice. I looked back one last time before leaving. The cubs had snuggled against her again. She lay still, too still. And inside me, a war had begun. That night I didn't sleep again. My mind kept circling back to that moment. The way she looked at me before I left. That quiet sigh. That stillness in her body that didn't feel like rest. It felt like surrender. Like something was shutting down inside her. At around 2 a.m., I got up and paced the cabin. I opened the cabinet where I kept my tools, the old maps, the first aid kits. My eyes landed on a rusty box labeled Emergency Vet Gear. It had been there since the days when I used to track wounded animals, not to save them, but to finish what others couldn't. I never thought I'd open that box for mercy. But I did. I laid everything out on the table. Antibiotics I wasn't sure were still usable, bandages, a field syringe, even a sedative dart that had expired years ago. None of it felt like enough. I had no idea what I was doing, no plan, just a feeling in my chest I couldn't shake. She doesn't have much time. By sunrise, I was on the move again. This time I brought a tarp, rope, and a portable stretcher I'd once used for dragging carcasses. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I arrived at the cliffside clearing, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The cubs weren't playing. They were huddled together, barely moving, ears low. One of them looked up at me, not with fear, but with confusion, like he was asking, "Where were you?" And then I saw her. She hadn't changed position. Her head was down, pressed against the dirt. Her sides moved with shallow breaths. Flies were starting to gather near the wound on her shoulder. It was worse now. Swollen, dark, leaking. Infection was spreading, fast. I dropped to my knees beside her, heart pounding. "Hey," I whispered. "Hey, girl, I'm back." She didn't react. I slowly reached out, resting my hand near her paw, not touching, just offering presence. The cubs didn't run. They circled nearby, watching, silent. And that silence, it felt like a weight. I needed help. But the nearest wildlife center was 2 hours away by road, and that's if I could get a signal. My cabin had no service. I'd be gambling everything on time I didn't have. So I made a choice. I took the tarp and laid it next to her, tied the ropes to the corners, looping them around the stretcher. Then, as gently as I could, I started to shift her weight. She groaned. Not loud, not aggressive, just pain. The cubs cried out then, a sound I hadn't heard before. It wasn't fear, it was panic, like they sensed something was happening they couldn't stop. I whispered constantly as I worked, "You're okay. I've got you now. We're not done, you and me." It took everything I had to lift her, inch by inch, limb by limb, onto the makeshift stretcher. Her body was heavy with weakness, her head lolled to the side. Once she was in place, I looked at the cubs, and I hesitated. What now? Do I leave them behind, take her alone? Hope they stay hidden, or do I risk it all and bring them? They were so small, maybe 4 months old. If she didn't make it, they wouldn't either. I couldn't bear the thought. I grabbed a second tarp, folded it like a soft basket, and gently coaxed the cubs in. They resisted at first, claws scraping, soft growls, but they didn't bite. They didn't run. It was like they remembered me, and I remembered them. I strapped the Lioness down, double-checked the knots, then hoisted the whole contraption onto a small cart I'd rigged for hauling game. It creaked under the weight. My hands trembled. My legs already hurt. But I moved, one step at a time. Every rock was a battle, every bump a risk. I had no backup, no vet license, no plan, just a half-dead lioness, two orphan-eyed cubs, and a man trying to rewrite his own past. It took me 4 hours to reach the road, another hour to find a signal. When I finally called the wildlife center, the woman on the other end didn't believe me. "You're doing what?" she asked. "I brought in a lioness. She's injured, and her cubs." Silence. Then, "Stay where you are. We're coming." When they arrived, 2 vets and a ranger jumped from the truck like a trauma team. They checked her pulse, her wound, her vitals. One of them gave me a look. Not judgment, just disbelief. "You shouldn't be alive," he said. "I'm not sure I am," I replied. They worked fast. Fluids, injections, oxygen. The cubs were kept close. Every time she stirred, they let them nuzzle her. When they finally lifted her into their vehicle, I stood there, covered in sweat, dirt, and guilt, watching her disappear into the truck like watching a piece of myself be taken away. And then, one of the cubs looked back at me. Just a glance. But it stayed, because in that single look, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind that doesn't come from silence, but from doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when you're late, even when you were once. The enemy. She wasn't out of danger, but neither was I, because saving a lioness is one thing, living with what she saved in you, that's another. They kept her at the sanctuary for observation. I wasn't allowed to stay, but I came back every day, sat outside the fence, watched from a distance. The vets called her Case 17, but I couldn't call her that. I started calling her Naya. Don't ask me why. It just came out one day. Naya. It felt right, like something ancient and soft and alive. The cubs were housed nearby, in a quiet enclosure filled with logs and shaded sand. Every time I arrived, they ran to the corner, pressing their tiny bodies against the mesh, sniffing the air like they knew. And maybe they did. We forget how much animals remember, not just with their heads, but with their bones. I'd watch them roll over each other, mimic hunting moves, fall asleep tangled like a single heartbeat. I'd whisper stories to them through the fence, and when no one was around, I'd cry. Naya was stable, but the infection had spread deeper than they thought. Her wound had turned necrotic. They debated surgery. I overheard them in the hallway one morning. 2 vets. Both tired, both frustrated. "She should be dead already," one of them said. "It's like she's holding on for something." I wanted to say, "She is," but I didn't. Because how do you explain that the reason a lioness is still breathing might have nothing to do with medicine, and everything to do with memory? One afternoon, as I sat on a bench watching the sun bleed through the trees, one of the staff came over. A woman named Clara. She was quiet, didn't speak much, always walked like her feet didn't want to bother the earth. She sat beside me without a word. Then she said, "Why are you really here?" I didn't answer at first, just stared at the cubs. One of them was pawing at a moth through the wire, full of wonder. I said, "I used to hunt them." She nodded slow. "And now?" I said, "Now I don't know who I am." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about that. Who was I now? Not a hunter, not a rescuer. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I didn't feel like one. I felt broken, unanchored, like a man with blood on his hands who got given a second chance and didn't know how to hold it. And Naya, she had become a mirror I didn't ask for. Every breath she took, every moment she fought to live, forced me to see parts of myself I'd buried in gunpowder and pride. The turning point came on a Thursday. The vet called me early in the morning, said she was declining fast. Said if I wanted to see her one last time, I should come now. I dropped everything, drove without thinking, heart pounding like a drum I couldn't silence. When I got there, they let me in, just for a few minutes. The cubs were asleep. Naya was lying on her side, hooked up to fluids, breathing slow. Her fur was thinner now, her body visibly smaller. But her eyes, God, those eyes still had fire. I knelt beside her, didn't touch, just spoke, told her I was sorry for everything. Not just for what I did to her kind, but for what I became. Told her I didn't deserve her trust, that I wasn't worth saving, that I didn't know how to forgive myself, but I hoped. Maybe she had. And then something happened. She opened her mouth, not a roar, not a cry, just a soft sound, almost a hum. Her paw shifted, barely, but it reached closer, toward me. And in that moment, I swear, every scar I'd ever carried inside and out went quiet. Not gone, just quiet. Like they were finally willing to let me breathe. The vet stepped in, gently asked me to leave. I nodded, took one last look, then walked out into the burning light of day. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Not because she was better. She wasn't. But because she gave me something more powerful than healing. She gave me permission to carry her pain, and finally, face mine. But the story wasn't over, not even close, because something happened the next morning. Something that would change everything. The morning came like all the others, quiet, golden, still, but there was something in the air, a thickness, the kind that sits on your chest before anything even happens. I woke before the sun, paced the porch of my cabin, drank cold coffee without tasting it. I didn't know why, but I couldn't sit still. At 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. It was Clara, 3 words. She stood up. I didn't believe her. After everything, after all the blood loss, the weakness, the slow decline, she stood up? Just for a moment, she said. But she did. I dropped the mug where I stood, didn't even lock the cabin. Drove so fast I didn't notice the turns. When I got there, she was back down. But the vet confirmed. They showed me the footage, grainy, black and white, from a camera in the enclosure. There she was, Naya, pressing one paw, then another, wobbling, trembling, rising like something ancient. And the cubs, they circled her like satellites, rubbing against her, eyes wide, not scared, just amazed, and I was too. It didn't last long. She collapsed again, but the damage was done. She had chosen to rise, not because she was strong, but because something inside her refused to give up. Over the next days, she improved inch by inch, ate small portions, licked her cubs more, blinked slower, and every time I came, I sat in the same spot, didn't talk much anymore, just listened, watched, waited. I didn't need words, not with her. We had seen each other's worst and survived. But life, wildlife, isn't a movie. There's no clean ending, no final scene with swelling music and perfect light. There's only the raw, brutal beauty of what is. 3 weeks after her rise, the sanctuary made a decision. They would release her. Not far, just into a monitored zone where she could be free, but still tracked. The cubs would go with her, together, as it always should have been. They asked if I wanted to be there. Of course I said yes. The release happened at dusk. We drove them deep into the reserve, far from tourists and roads. The sky was bruised purple and orange, and the wind had that electric smell it gets right before a storm. I watched as the truck doors opened. She stepped out first, hesitant, sniffing, her body thinner but alert, her gait slow but proud. Then the cubs followed, darting out, tumbling into the grass, free for the first time since their birth. She didn't look back at first, just moved forward. But then she stopped, turned, and saw me. Our eyes locked for what must have been 5 seconds. Not long, but enough. Because in that look, there was no fear, no confusion, no distance, only memory, only understanding. And then she vanished into the tall grass. Gone, but not gone, because she left something behind in me. That night I sat by the fire outside my cabin. No drink, no gun, just silence, just stars. and I realized something I hadn't been able to name until then. I wasn't trying to atone anymore. I wasn't trying to be someone new. I had simply become someone who knew the cost, someone who chose differently, even when the world didn't ask me to. You see, I didn't save a lioness. She saved me, with trust, with presence, with the courage to keep breathing when it hurt. I still think of her sometimes, wonder where she is, if the cubs are bigger now, if she remembers me when the wind shifts. But I don't need answers, because what she taught me lives in every breath I take. And if you've ever stood at the edge of something, grief, regret, your own worst mistake, and thought there was no way back, just remember her. Remember the fall she survived. Remember the trust she gave. And know this: sometimes the most human thing we can do is listen to the wild.